Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Shop Stool podcast, a podcast for woodworkers and the maker community in general. This is episode number 17. My name is Robin Lewis from robinlewismakes.com. I'm joined by Joey Chalk from King Post Timberworks.
Hello.
And Jordan Crawford from Periodic Furniture Studio.
Hello.
We live stream the recording on YouTube every Thursday evening at 6 p.m., although at the moment for the next 2 weeks, it's going to be Monday at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, or UTC plus 10. Or you can watch or listen to it later on YouTube, iTunes, or SoundCloud. I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. We'll get your comments towards the end of the show, but feel free to chat amongst yourselves. The idea being that this is also a place for people to meet. So just a couple of announcements that I want to start with. First off is that if you haven't been paying attention for the last couple of weeks, Jordan has been he's actually on the road at the moment, so he hasn't been able to join us in the podcast. He's with us tonight, which is pretty cool. He's in Canberra at the moment, but he was able to make it. So just a quick update, Jordan. How's the work? I guess tell people what you do on the side and how it's going.
Yeah. Okay. So how it's all going is really well. I mean, it's second week in. We haven't really had a break yet, so it's getting a little bit to that stage of wanting to murder every one of your workmates, but. We all get there. But no, it's going really well. So I'm out with the show as the stage manager for the show, but in the tech time, so from lunchtime till the show time, I'm the robotic technician.
Because when you say show, is this like a theatre production?
Yeah, a live theatre show. So if anyone has been around in the 90s, the performer's name is David Strassman. He's a ventriloquist. Which is pretty big over here still. And the thing that makes him different is all of his puppets are robotic. So he can control them like with a remote control in his hand and the mouse will move. But they've also got moving arms, moving heads, eyes, everything's animated. So there's a lot that can go wrong. And there has been a few things go wrong, and that's why I missed the first week I was away. I had pretty big failure in a crappy country town with no electronics store, so it was just hell. But yeah, no, it's been good. So this Saturday, that had just passed, we shot our DVD, which means that all of the stress from this tour has now been lifted. Yeah. Now it's just, we'll get to the venue, we'll do a show. If something goes wrong, well, it doesn't matter. Because the DVD is still shot.
Did you only shoot one show?
We shot two shows, right? But in one night. So we do 2 shows a night sometimes.
Because usually, my limited knowledge here, but my understanding is that you would shoot up to 4 different shows and then just pick the best bits out of all of them for something like that.
Yes, that is exactly how you should do it, and you should even do a few shoots in a different theatre just in case the crowd reacts differently. However, I don't want to say it too wrong, but that costs money, and
understand.
Anyway, we did good. I mean, both the shows that we recorded had pretty good lines messed up, but that's all right.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But yeah, no. What else? That's it. I have my first day off today, so that's pretty cool. Oh, last week I patted a rhino. That was cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning of last week's show, John was at a zoo, and we were laughing because I'm from South Africa, and I've never even seen a lion, let alone petted a rhino. And here you are getting all of that stuff. I feel I'm ashamed of my heritage.
You know, the craziest thing is hyenas. There was 2 hyenas that I got to feed, and they are the most amazing looking thing. But because of the Lion King, I always had in my head that they were these vicious, ugly, smelly things.
They're just arseholes, yeah.
But yeah, they were cool. They didn't stink. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to get in the cage with them, but they were just really cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
I saw that you were okay, carry on.
No, go for it, Joey.
I saw you were feeding a lion, man. That seems insane to be allowed to do that.
Yeah, well, so I don't know if I should say it, but
okay.
I made friends with the zookeeper at night So on that day, like we went around, we fed lions, giraffes, the rhino, we patted the rhino, we did, I can't even remember everything, the meerkats, the lemur, a few of the smaller reptiles, the aquarium. I patted a shark that was like a 3-meter shark. And like
everything.
Yeah, like needless to say, it was a mind-blowing experience, and I was kind of caught up in the moment, and I just really hit it off with the zookeeper. So at the end of the night, at 11 o'clock, after being wined and dined with all you could like imagine, she was like, "Oh, I got to go do the lockup," and we dropped off the boss in the meantime. And I was like, "Would it be cool if I came and saw it?" So she took me back behind all of the enclosures to like the quarantined breeding area. Well, I didn't get to go in the door, but I got to pop my head through. I patted like a Burmese python, which has got the smoothest skin of all snakes. It was incredible.
I've just got this image of you running around just patting everything, just like
I was in this amazing like place for a whole 24 hours afterwards of just awe. It was so cool.
Jeez, cool.
Yeah, that's
cool. I could talk about it for hours, so I'll stop here because I will ramble.
Right. And I'll just mention as well that we haven't actually talked about which zoo you were at, so you're
exactly
probably safe.
We're fine. Oh, I mean, I'm sure it was fine.
You were over here in Auckland, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I was in Singapore or something.
Oh, yeah, right.
All right. So then the next thing we wanted to touch on, which Ross over in the chat has already brought up, and I know there's a few of you wanting to find out. Joey, your kitchen, how did that all turn out?
Okay.
Actually, before we do that, let me prep anyone who doesn't know the backstory. Okay. Last week, Joey had a very uncomfortable call just before the podcast about the kitchen that he installed. It was slightly out technically, and the client was unhappy about it. And we heard all about it, but we haven't heard the resolution yet. So how'd it go?
Okay, so there's a few things I guess I need to clear up a little bit because, yes, the client was complaining about the kitchen being about 2 millimeters out of level over about, I think it was 3.5 meters long. And so that is not cool to get that phone call. But there were actually some problems that needed fixing, and it wasn't really till I got to site that we could work through what was going on. And so I have to say up front that there was definitely some miscommunication on my part. There was miscommunication on the client's part, but that actually had nothing to do with the phone call. So it was quite a different conversation on site. In fact, any of that talk about the leveling didn't even come up on site. So it was all about this other issue, which completely kind of threw me for a 6. So how do I explain this? So the original drawings that the client gave me, some hand-drawn drawings to quote from. So I was like, fine, had measurements on it. When I did the site measure, the wall that the kitchen was going along was 300 mil shorter than his drawings added up to. So somewhere I had to lose 300 mil from the design, which is easy enough. I whack 300 mil off a set of drawers and the kitchen's going to fit.
Sorry, just to stop you there, that was his drawing was out by 300. Okay, yep.
Yep. Or the building was built 300 mil short, something. But the actual size was 300 mil shorter than what I had quoted for.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine, it's just that's why you do a site measure. We'll shorten up one of the cabinets and make it fit. So he had assumed that I was going to shorten up the corner unit.
Oh, yeah.
And I shortened up the drawer unit. And the reason I didn't shorten up the corner unit is, one, it's easy to shorten up a drawer unit. And two, if anyone's ever made a corner unit before, there comes a point where the opening size just becomes too small and too impractical to actually get into the corner to put stuff away. So it has to be a fairly kind of good size space. So that is kind of one problem, and that could be dealt with to a point. But the major problem was that, so if I just talk about order of operations a little bit here, generally you would install a kitchen, there will be power in the right place for the range hood, the extractor over the stove, but the holes for the extra extractor pipe are almost never cut until the kitchen's in and you actually go to install the range hood.
Is that the way it should be, or just the way it's in?
That's the way it should be, because you do the job when you need it done. Like, that's kind of how it's done. So I get there to install the kitchen, and the hole's already through the wall, and they've put the hole through the cladding, and it's all finished. And I'm kind of like, okay, what measurement are you working from for this thing? So he had assumed that obviously that the corner unit was going to be shorter, and so we're 150 mil out for the hole in the wall.
It's just compounding now.
Yeah, but actually it was going to fit just. The range would have. I did all the measurements, and it actually was just going to fit by about 5 mil. So I was like, okay, we're still good. But when I went back after to assume I was just going to re-level the kitchen, it became apparent that needed to be sorted. That was his main issue. So at the end of the day, what I had to do was on site, I pulled the whole kitchen out. I dismantled the corner unit completely. I had to scribe it into the corner to gain a few extra mil that I needed. And then I chopped 150 mil off the end of it, screwed the end cap back onto it. For some reason, I had taken half a sheet of birch plywood with me, because I thought I might have to redo a skirting or something, a toe kick or something. And I had to add 150 mil unit on the other side of where the drawers were, and I had to add a little, like a breadboard or oven tray, little cupboard. So I had to build that on site, rip the other one down, do all that. So it took me all day. I was there from, I don't know when I got there, 9:30 till 4 or something like that. And yeah, eventually got it, and then we had to put that together, clear coat it, and re-level the whole thing. And so then he was happy. That's what he said.
And I assume at this point, obviously, the countertop's not, you didn't have to take the countertop off.
No, they were waiting on me. I did feel a bit bad about it, because that day I went back. The next day they had booked in to have the benchtop templators come in.
Okay, yeah.
And they had to put him off an extra day, which actually was not too bad. But so this was Tuesday in the week. Now, at the time, he had asked me to price up to build the range hood box, because they had bought a built-in type range hood.
Yeah.
So I took some measurements, and he wanted a little shelf. I was like, fine, take some measurements. I said, I'll get you a price next week, which is this week. So, and then by Thursday came, which when his money was due, no money came in. Friday, I emailed and said, where's my money? He said, I'm waiting because you took an extra day to finish the kitchen. So I'm going to take an extra day to pay you.
What? Power play much? Thanks.
Yes.
And then, and also that he wanted to make sure the kitchen benchtop was properly measured up for whatever. So I was like, okay. So I ended up getting my money. And then,
that's right. At least he came through.
But then Sunday night, he emailed and said, where's the quote for the little shelf and the range hood box? We need it installed next week. So needless to say, that's not happening.
So what? You just said, that's it, I'm done.
No, I said I can't do it by then. Which
and
I can't.
So he said, okay, thanks very much. I'll go somewhere else.
Haven't heard from him.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's
a word that comes to mind about that, but I won't say it.
Yeah. So these are the fun things you get probably once a year, I'd say.
Would you class this as quite a, because I know it was a couple of weeks ago we talked about terrible clients.
Because I got paid, and and it was a pain in the ass. But I am definitely, I am willing to fix something if it's my stuff up, and like I kind of mentioned in that podcast the other week or a couple of weeks ago, is that this is a bit ambiguous. It's not 100% my fault, but there's definitely some of it is my fault. And so when that is the case, you can't pick and choose what you do or do want to fix. You just have to say, right, I am responsible for some of this. And you can't fix the kitchen, so I'm going to have to fix the kitchen, and that's it. And I did it. I smashed it out in a day, and I was like, right, now give me my money. So, and I got it. I don't like being put in that position of kind of ransom. Because, anyone who's ever built anything for money knows that that last payment, that's my money. The deposit pays for the job. The last bit of, or most of that remaining final payment is my wages, and I hadn't been paid for 3 weeks, and I really could do with buying groceries in the weekend. I think people think there's businesses have got these huge cash flow sitting around in the bank. It doesn't really work like that. There is some money sitting around, but that's not mine to spend. I need the money from the job so I can eat. So it's just an interesting, everything worked out in the end. So
Jason's got a pretty strong view about it in the chat there. Unfortunately, I'm not going to mention what you said, Jason, for the listeners because I'm trying to keep this PG, but everyone in the chat, I'm sure, will agree with you.
Yeah, I think like that to a point, but I also think, which is something I haven't really considered before, the client is building a new house. They're in a very tight budget, and they're trying to get it done into a deadline, and they're under some stress, and he's trying to hold down a full-time job. And there's certainly an amount of
You've got to hold empathy for him.
But... Yeah, that's what I mean. There's a level of empathy where this guy's just trying to do the best for his family. He's got a vision of what he wants. It wasn't quite how he envisioned it, and wanted it fixed. And I understand that because I've been in that same position. You just want someone to do their bloody job. Like, just fix it, And so I get that. And that's why I like to try and fix what I need to. But there's a certain amount of being nice to someone's face and then having a completely different tone on via email. I find it hard to deal with that. And that's when I start distancing myself from a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, to me, the fact that you fixed it immediately should have just cleared up any issues, because a lot of the time the contractors or the traders would drag their feet along, but you've said, no, I'm going to fix this immediately because there's a problem, which I think if anything that should reinforce this guy's trusted you.
Yeah.
It's not like you've screwed him over, you made a mistake, but then you've fixed it immediatty. That's better than
this is something I've wanted to actually say in a couple of other podcasts, but haven't really had the thought about actually saying it, is that certainly myself, I would say both of us, we never go out with some malicious intent. We're not going out to try and cause a problem. We're not trying to rip somebody off. We just want to do our job and get what we deserve for it.
Yeah.
And I think that because there are people like that out there and people get scammed often, there's a certain amount of, this bloody tradie's running away with my cash or, rip me off.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a point of view, I think, that some people just automatically jump to the conclusion that you're useless. And that's hard to deal with because it's certainly not who my personality is. That's, I just, anyone who knows my background knows I'm only doing this because I love doing what I do. I could make way better money doing something else, anything else. I could be building still and me making a shit ton more money, but it's not fun. And so I don't like getting into these conflicts because that's not what I'm here for. And so being accused or having this kind of sly intent of you're stuffing me around is not at all what I'm about. So I find that a bit difficult to work through sometimes.
And on that, I think another thing that people often forget and by people I mean clients, is that as a small business, as you and I both are, this is what is our art. So like we have pride in what we do. So obviously if we mess it up, we would want to fix it. But if they're not kind of going along the same journey with you or being facetious or whatever,
it's true.
It affects us a lot more than it would if a tradie that's just gone in to install some laminate flooring. Like, you know, it's a different ball game, but they don't necessarily see it like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's very true. That's very true. Something else as well that I think is short-sighted, possibly from his end, is like when I engage with aircon installers, sparkies, plumbers, every time I talk to someone, I'm like, I hope this is going to become my plumber, or this is going to become my electrician.
Yep.
And I've gone through about 3 different AC guys, and I finally found my guy. And I will ring Shane up whenever I need, because he's that guy. The last thing I want to do is annoy him, and then I've got to go find someone else. Like, you know, it's really just destroying that relationship that you want to have with your guy.
Yes, a big put off. You just have one little kind of tiff, and then you're like, right, this is not working.
You're officially scratched out of his yellow pages now.
Yeah,
for good.
Absolutely. Yeah, but vice versa as well. So
yeah, well, yeah.
You know, I've had it where I've thought I'd be scratched out of their page, and then they come back to me, and then they turn out to be a brilliant client. They give you the freedom, and I wouldn't like count on him not coming back ever again.
No, you're right. That has happened to me too, where I've thought, this person's got back to me, and I really didn't think they were very happy based on their last email or whatever it is. But actually could have just been a bad day. So
exactly. As you say, it's the stress of building a house. Yeah, have a little bit of empathy for the guy, and it makes
what
sense.
I think mostly it is. It's like, just, you know, he's got this it seems very tight timeline, and things don't happen on the days where he's got it all mapped out on a spreadsheet. And if it doesn't happen on the day, then, you know, it's not good.
All right. Well, yeah, it ended. You got there in the end. Maybe not the outcome that you would have hoped for, but at least I guess it's over. So, is this going to tie into the topic for tonight then?
Let's see. Probably not, but that's a good segue. Probably not.
Well, that's fine. So the topic for tonight.
Well, I could do, thinking about what I just said.
That's why I immediately thought that's what it was. So the topic for tonight, this came from Joey. It's about we're going to talk about the types of plans that you use in the shop. So do you have a detailed blueprint with measurements and everything, or do you have sort of a handwritten note on a napkin? And was there a story to go along with it, Joe?
Yeah. So quite a few times. So there's two little stories here. So earlier, what are we now? Monday. So sometime last week, I was emailed through a drawing of a built-in, very complicated sofa, extremely complicated thing, and they had drawn. They had CAD drawings, 2D CAD drawings with measurements everywhere. Jordan's probably familiar with what I'm talking about. Often if you're in a kitchen manufacturer, they have these printouts on A4, A3, and you can't make any sense out of it. It does not make any sense why you draw plans up this way, but that's what seems to happen. The only saving grace for this particular job I'm talking about, the sofa, is that they had included a couple of 3D renderings. And I didn't even look at the plans. I just took the actual plans. I took a measurement. Okay, it was going to be 3 meters long or whatever it was. And then I just based everything kind of guesstimating what I'd need based off the 3D drawing, because there's no other way I could tell what the hell was going on. I mean, really, you could sit down and spend an hour working out what each elevation and what each section is trying to tell you. But it doesn't, you don't need that kind of level of information. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And also, I quite often get people asking for the plans for my workbench. which I don't have. I have a SketchUp model, and I'm happy to give it away to people who email me. And so I gave this guy, some random person, the model, and he came back and said, "This is okay, thanks, but where's the detailed plans? I need to be able to like copy it." So I don't even think I've responded to that. And so it got me thinking, like, what? Because I'm definitely not the kind of person who can work off this very detailed CAD drawing. And I wonder if there are furniture makers out there who do it. I can't see how you can, but yeah, I guess I could throw it over to you guys and riff on it.
Well, I just want to jump in there before we get into it. When he says plans, I assume he's talking about the write-up of like the steps.
Well, no, as far as when I gathered from his email, he was after like
a tech drawing,
technical drawings, two-dimensional elevations, sections, actual finite measurements, which I could probably do, but But
he could recreate it himself in SketchUp.
Yeah, can't you extrapolate it from?
Well, you can just take the measurements literally off the SketchUp model.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, turn it into a wireframe, and there you go. Like, so it's very so I guess maybe I'd say how I'd go about doing things is, which we have touched on a little bit, but I thought it might be worthwhile. And I'd like to hear what you guys think about the whole tech drawing thing and if it's necessary. But just about every job I've ever done is I make a 3D model that is to scale and it's the right size. And I can look at that in the workshop. But generally, I'm only looking at one or two measurements, which are the critical measurements. And once that piece, let's say, I don't know, a bench top or something, that's got to fit into a specific space. Everything that's holding up that bench top is relative to the bench top. It's got nothing to do with the drawings anymore. That's just for me really to work out how much materials I need or to work out a complicated little section. But yeah, so what do you guys think about crazy complex drawings that seem to make things more confusing, I think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% on your level. Like, I don't think there's a place for technical drawings with engineering and with metal fabricators and all of that, because they're relying on a fixed they're using this specific fastener, so it has to go through that specific hole and this specific because it's mounting on. But as a furniture maker working in wood, we have a very forgiving material, so like we don't need to position that hole to the nearest thousandth. As long as it's center in that rail and it's holding the correct edge down, it will get that sorted. I do like working from projection plan, like just projection drawing. So I have the front face, side, and the top. But never do I rely on them. Like I have them there so I have a few reference dimensions. Like for example, the amount of overhang between the top and the apron. Like that's useful to have, but I don't need all of the other information. But yeah, like let's say my standard go-to is I'll have the 3D model I've done in SketchUp. I take the vital drawings from that in Notepad, and I'll then just go out into the workshop and start cutting stuff. I like to work with templates, so I often will make a template, as you've probably seen if you've watched my videos, and that's about all the plans I would rely on anyway.
There's 2 points, I suppose, to that I always find very confusing when people want to work from plans. Is one, say you're talking about steel, it comes in standard thicknesses and widths, and they're exactly right.
You don't mill a piece of steel down to
or you can, but often you don't.
It's engineering level that you start doing that sort of stuff.
So when your plan calls for 17 mil timber and you throw it through the thicknesser and oops, it's a bit too thin, now you've got 16 mil. What do people do if they're only relying on the plans? Do they just throw that out and start again, or do they have to try and work out all the knock-on effects for that extra 1 mil. Like if you just cut your stretcher a mil too short, all your other measurements might as well be rubbish. Or do you just it seems way harder to just than to just work your way through measuring what you've got. So
a couple of weeks ago, I think I mentioned to you guys, I've started using SketchUp for the first time, and it's amazing for getting like this 3D model of what you're going to look at. Fantastic. So at the moment, I'm working on a co-sleeper, which is like a small cot, and I finished the design. It was cool. I checked with my wife. She loved it. I was like, right, I'm going to take down these measurements. I try to find something to like get a cut list from it, but we'll get to that in a second. I assume that's a plugin for SketchUp. But I wrote down the couple of measurements that I wanted, like the slat gap and all of that. Made my first couple of cuts, and I was already out by a couple of millimeters because it's so like the measurements that I was using, that I was looking at, were those measurements, as you say, that actually aren't important. They can be a bit loose. But I immediately, like my first couple of cuts were out by a couple of millimeters. and I just thought, oh, well, now do I start? I'm not going to start again because it's too much work.
Redraw it, or do I throw my timber out? And
it was in that moment that I had that thought of, hang on, there's some vital measurements here where, like in this case, where the mattress goes, but everything else I can sort of work around that. And yes, the idea of taking all your measurements out of your drawing is actually, you're gonna have a pretty bad day in the workshop if you're trying to follow that.
Yeah, and I guess it comes to some workflow things as well. So just thinking about the kitchen and the one I'm building now. So when I'm making the vertical dividers for the kitchen carcass, I cut all of them at the same time. I count on my drawing that I need 17 pieces, and they've all got to be this long. And I set the saw up, and I cut them all at the same time. So one, I don't have to go back and try and set the saw up, and two, like that's one operation kind of done. And so then that piece gets added on to a carcass, and you can measure from that what is the next measurement. Cutting all because I've heard that some people will make drawings and cut all the pieces.
Yeah, you get a cut list from SketchUp, and you put it up on the wall and just run with it. Yeah.
So how, like, I don't know how that even works, because you're asking for trouble, man.
I mean, I would say batch out all your cuts in one sort of sitting is the best way to do it, though. So if you have a cut list which has 3 rails at 1719, and then you got 4 at 305. Like, you cut all of the same lengths, so it transfers through. And then I've lost my train of thought.
I know Jay Bates does that in his videos. He seemed to be very big on a cut list, but unless you have the right, like, for me, like my chop saw doesn't have, like, I don't have a way of setting up a good stop block. I don't have a table saw. So for me to repeat cuts it's a real tricky endeavor. So a cut list is almost immediately out the window for me.
I think that for me, like, it's only casework where I will have a cut list and stick to it. I mean, every build I do, I will have a idea of a cut list, so I know that I have these rails, but it's not all laid out at the beginning of the build. It's like, I'm working on the top today, so I'm going to get the top sort, and then the next day I'll go back to my model, and I'm, we're working on the drawers, so I have all the dimensions for the drawers or whatever, like I'll go back and forth to a model and get the relevant cut lists for what I'm working on, but I don't have it at the beginning of every build unless it's casework.
I guess it also comes down to your acceptable tolerances.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it doesn't matter if you're a mill out. You can just... Like if you're using draw runners, which have a little bit of adjustment, or those nice, the European style hinges, like you've got plenty of room for error. Try and aim for perfection, but you can fix it. That's right.
But if you're doing traditional sliding drawers and all that sort of stuff, it becomes a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, I don't know if I posted a picture earlier today on Instagram of the doors I've made for my bookcase.
Yeah,
and Right, so for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's just a simple frame and panel door, but there's a cross through the middle. So it turns one door into 4 panels. And that they are legitimate floating panels, so that's all done properly. So if you were trying to cut the small sections of the cross via Cutlists, I can guarantee the gaps would be way unacceptable for the main face of a door that I'm going to look at every day sitting in my lounge.
Mm.
You know, there's going to be a gap that is no good. So purposefully, those pieces weren't cut until I had dry fitted the whole door, and then I actually measured, and there was a difference between the 4 doors. There was a mil difference. And that's just the way it dry fitted together. The pieces were all cut the same, or there are other pieces of the doors, but because of the way it had whatever it wanted to sit. So you can't also rely on, if you rely on your cutting to be bang on, and you might have the best laser cut fancy majig that's going to make exactly the same length pieces. But if you don't have a way to say, set your domino up that is perfect, then the point of all that exact cutting is kind of gone out the window.
Yeah. I think it comes down to also having enough experience to know when you need a precise cut off a list, and also when you just need to rely on relative dimensioning. So if you can look at the model and you can see, well, obviously this has to be exactly that length, but I won't actually cut this until I've got this subassembly done, because I'll then just transfer the length I need from that.
So one of the earliest podcasts that we did, I think we talked about lessons we had learned, and I mentioned something similar to that. As someone who's not been doing this as long as you guys, that was one of the biggest revelations for me, was to work out that some things needed to be to measure, and other things needed to be referenced. When you have that experience that you know which one's which, everything just becomes so much easier and smoother. You just, all those like sweat moments just disappear, because you don't need to focus on the measurement of absolutely every single thing.
And even to the point now where probably you've all done it as well, that you actually take the piece, instead of measuring it, you just scribe it directly off what you're making. You hold the piece of wood up, scribe it. You have no clue how long it is, but it's the right length. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what relative dimensioning is, you know, like.
One thing that I heard, I can't remember if it was from a guy called Andrew Klein or it was Frank Howarth. One of them said it, although I think they actually said they had heard it from someone. So, but it was basically along the lines of, the biggest key to woodworking is not being able to measure correctly, but to be able to make repeated cut lengths. So in other words, being able to measure and cut correctly is not as important as being able to make 4 of the same sizes. That is far more valuable, because then you can, your squares will be square, you know, from that perspective. Yeah. That's a much more important thing than just being able to, as we're saying, run off a cut list.
What's the other saying? It's not important to have everything perfect, but you just have to learn how to hide your mistakes or something.
That's a nice succinct way to say it. Yeah.
That needs to be on a bumper sticker somewhere.
Yeah. It's a long bumper sticker.
So Greg in the chat has just brought up something that's really interesting. Does SketchUp take into account blade curve? Now, I can almost guarantee you no one's going to be thinking about that. Again,
well, geez, I would be.
Really? Nah, that's
I know Fusion does. I know Fusion does. I don't know. It would come down to the plugin that you're using. There's heaps of Cutlists plugins. So you just set that every cut has a 3.2 millimeter kerf, and you're set.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that. I've just been dealing with a designer in Australia, actually. He got in touch with me after he saw my chairs video, because he's struggling to find the right chairs for his client. And long story short, he sent through his chair design through, and he had the exact same issue where he had these nice CAD drawings, and he had allowed to buy, say, a 150 by 50, and he could nest on the pieces for the chairs and get like 12 pieces out of this one, and then every little morsel of timber was taken up, but there was no room for one timber variation and straightness. And kerf. And so, as soon as you take 3 or 4 cuts, especially with the table saw, there's 10 mil. So, you've lost a shit ton of timber, plus the allowance to clean it up and clean up the saw marks as well. There's another 0.5 mil. So, and not allowing for saw kerf is like you're asking for a whole lot of trouble.
But I guess though that comes down to more to how you're going to manage your resources. Like in my drawing, I'm going to take measurements of my drawing, but that's got nothing to do with kerf width, or because what the drawing is. What it is important is for when I buy my stock.
Yeah, but I mean, it's fairly easy to calculate. You just have how many cuts you have, and then add 2 times the kerf of your blade on top of every cut. So if there's 16 cuts, then you would go 32 times 3.2 and add that onto your additional stock.
When I'm working with solid timber, I allow 5 mil for each kerf.
Yeah.
And that's that way when I'm buying my rough timber, that kind of extra 10 mil is taking into account that I'm not going to get a dead straight piece of timber, even if it's relatively short. By the time it's squared up, I'm going to be down to my kind of optimal size for cutting the piece.
Now, in terms of, so we've talked about obviously what we use in the workshop. Is it important that the drawing is because obviously in SketchUp it's going to be to scale. Are you guys able to picture what it's going to look like without the drawing? And I ask this because my wife must be zero imagination. She can't picture, when I talk to her about something, she can't picture it in her head. So SketchUp's fantastic for that because it's the perfect tools. Because Jordan, a lot of the work that you do is like, it's very grand. It's really big stuff. Can you picture what it's going to look like without seeing a scale model?
I can, but what I still struggle with is like often things like how much of a reveal is going to be needed to get the right level of detail. So often I spend just as much time standing and looking at a piece and trying to figure out those small details as I do actually building it. The biggest thing that helps me in starting a big build is I have a piece of like a whiteboard insert, and I draw a 1-to-1 right there in the workshop of the side, so I can kind of get a sense of the scale of it from a physical drawing. So I guess to answer your question, I still actually would have a plan of sort to look at, but it's not going to show me everything I need to look at. It's just giving me kind of the scale.
It's still also very relativistic because you are, as you say, when you look at it, that's where you're working off your measurements. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm almost always can fully picture what I'm. Otherwise I couldn't draw it. Like if I couldn't completely see it, and especially I couldn't draw it quickly. So a good example of this is when I made my federal desk, which is a crazy 6 episodes. I don't know why I made such a long video series. It's a good lesson for you. Don't make long video series. So I knew exactly what I was going to build. I had it entirely mapped out in my head, but what I couldn't do, and this is SketchUp is invaluable, is I couldn't work out on the inside where the secret drawer is going to go. Is this other piece of timber going to come through at a certain point because it has to? And is there going to be enough room for this thing to slide past this thing? And I couldn't. And it's a crucial detail because do I start building the secret drawer into the carcass before I know that it's even going to pass and get through past the stretcher that has to be in the way? So that's where I draw and go into SketchUp and completely draw how I'm going to build it. And I can zoom right in there and slide my drawer in and out and go, right, I need to lose 5 mil somewhere because this is not going to pass through this thing. And so that is, to me, like working out that kind of very complicated where pieces have to interact with each other and you're not quite sure, like trying to visualize that is a very complex thing to do.
So you're getting in trouble later on, yeah.
Yeah, so in that case, that's, awesome. Also, Robin, you mentioned scale just before, which I thought was interesting. Just is kind of turning into a SketchUp podcast, but when you draw something, it's 1-to-1 scale. It's full scale when you draw it in SketchUp. So 100 mil is 100 mil. And sometimes it happens that you draw a thing and it's a bit too big or it's a bit too small. And instead of redrawing it or enlarging the components, you can just scale it up using the scale tool. And you can select the whole model and just decrease it or increase it slightly.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't realize you could do that.
Yeah. So what it does is make the overall dimensions of your of the piece the size you want it, but it increases the individual components in the direction that you're stretching it or you're scaling it. So
so you can actually go in a direction. It doesn't have to just be everything goes up.
Yeah, you can either go up or down or diagonally and do everything at the same time. But oftentimes you just want to scale down a fridge to fit into a hole or something. And so you'll take it from 800 to 700. All right. And you just squeeze up the model a little bit and then it's the right size. But if you do that to, say, a table and you stretch it to make it a bit longer, what it is actually doing is scaling up the thickness of the legs. So they might have gone from 100 by 100 to 120 by 100 because you've stretched the whole thing, which is fine. Most people won't see it if you give the client that picture. But if you start measuring off that drawing and suddenly you've forgotten that those components have actually been scaled up in one direction as well, that is a whole world of hurt. Because you've completely stuffed up.
Yeah, because then your stretches would be all cocked up.
Everything's wrong. So that's something to think about if you're going to be measuring crucial measurements from your models.
I must say, personally, going back to the being able to visualize thing, I think I might not be able to visualize it perfectly, but I've got a good idea of what will work and won't work. So scaling stuff up, that's just sort of a broad idea of what it's going to look like. So from that perspective, regardless of whether the model's, half scale or full scale, it doesn't matter. All that I want to really see is the proportions. That's the more important thing. But even with that, I can sort of see it in my head already. I think where SketchUp for me personally is going to come into handy is for showing clients. It must be invaluable there. Or as you say, obviously the more technical stuff where you've got to work out if there's space for certain stuff.
And pricing. I mean, that's the biggest use for me. I could get away without using SketchUp for most of the things I do, but I have to price it. So I need a model to price it.
So Rob's asked, are you guys using the web version or the pro? So I'm using the one that you can download. I downloaded it just a couple of weeks ago, and then
Make.
That's the one. Yeah. And I think you can use it indefinitely, but you just have a very limited suite of tools.
Yeah. It's not actually, I use the same, and I had a client who bought the Pro because he was he wanted to start drawing up his own furniture. So he bought the Pro version, and he bought it on his laptop to the workshop once, and it didn't impress me overly much.
No.
It wasn't $1,000 worth of SketchUp.
Yeah, because it's mad expensive. Hey, jeez.
I've got the Pro version, but it was from when I was still at uni. Like you could get a student license, so it was a one-time thing. I think it was like $79 or something. Yeah. So I've got an old version of Pro, and then on my laptop, which I'm on now, I have just the free Make version.
So does the old version update?
No, so that license was only for that version of the software. That's the pain. But I still, like, if I'm designing on my laptop, I'll save that model as like SketchUp 8 or whatever it is.
Right.
Open it on that one, and then I'll do the extraction of this component from this component, and I do all the things that I need on Pro and Pro, but everything else is just in the free version.
Yeah.
All right. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to add? Because we're running out of time. We've got some questions.
No, go for it. Questions.
No,
Cool.
I'm good.
Do you guys have any questions that you had asked to you?
No one's talked to me. I've been very lonely.
Playing with animals and
Playing with animals.
Well, we'll start with one of them. We just had one in the chat now. This was a comment on one of our last week's video, I think. So we'll just touch on this briefly because I know we are eventually going to turn this into an episode. It's from Watermond. I'd like to know what procedures you all use to prepare surfaces for finish, so sandpaper, scrapers, planes, or other. So, Jordan?
This is
and
that's why I say let's just do a brief one and we'll turn this into a full episode one day.
Yeah, there's a lot of methods, but my most go-to, which I'll say, is I would put it through my wide belt sander or my stroke sander up to 180 grit, and then I finish sand to 220 most of the time with just a random orbital for flat surfaces. And then for things which are a little bit tighter to get into, I occasionally scrape, but most of the time I just rely on sanding. I have good quality sanders, so it goes pretty quickly with the Stool stuff.
Joey?
Generally, I will sand up to 400 if need be. So on veneers, pretty much only touch it with 400. I will scrape like something like a tabletop. I'm going to flatten it by hand plane, scrapers, and probably go over it with a smoothing plane. And even if I get a very nice finish from a smoothing plane, I'm almost certainly going to hit it with a 220 or 400 grit, because it's a texture issue. I find it's very, very difficult to get an even texture on the timber just with hand planing, even though it looks very nice and shiny. There are patches that don't cut the same in the way the grain changes. And so I find it's very important to have, by sanding it, it kind of scuffs up all of the grain to an even color, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Even texture.
Even texture.
So with your planing, it's not a method I do, so a genuine question is, if you burnish after planing with the shavings, does that get rid of that color discrepancy, or is it still noticeable?
I guess that's going to depend on the timber type. Let me see what would do that. Like white oak definitely is very difficult to get an even planed finish on.
Yeah.
You definitely end up with glossy patches and duller patches just because the grain direction. Same with ash. I have done that before, burnished with shavings, but I haven't done it really in a commercial sense because it's a lot of hard work, and you may as well hold a piece of sandpaper there and cut your time in half. But it does make a nice finish. I mean, you can essentially polish that up to like a polished surface with the timber shavings.
I mean, it's popular with turners, so
yeah, that's right.
I have found I go up to about so it's all sandpaper for me. I haven't got to the finishing with scrapers and planes yet. So it's all sanding up to orbital sander up to about 320, and then the last bit, if I can, I try and go with the grain with some hand sandpaper, sort of 320, 600 maybe, and that's where I'd stop. But I try and do the last bit of sanding with the grain as best as possible on the really high grit.
Do you go that high anyway with the polyurethane, or is that only for oil?
So it depends a lot where it is. Like on the tabletop, I generally go up just because that's the most important tactile surface. But with legs, 320 wouldn't go past that.
Yeah.
And then obviously, poly, then you sand it afterwards. But the only time I'd ever go up to 600 most of the time is for something like a tabletop, a really big surface where you can really make it shine, so to speak.
Right.
Metaphorically. All right. Anthony Toba, could you discuss, this is one of the older questions, could you discuss costs of woodworking and DIY in Australia? Does the cost of equipment and materials in Australia impede the industry here? So the idea is that over in the US, tools are a lot cheaper than they are here. I had a comment on a planer video just the other day, a thickness planer video, about how in the video I talked about how the DeWalt thickness planer here is $1,000, and this person left me a comment saying, no, it's not, it's $400. I don't think they realized that I was an Australian.
Right.
They're probably in the US. But yeah, so I guess I think we've talked about this briefly before, but Joey, do you think the cost of our tools on this end of the world affects does it affect our ability for DIYs to get into this?
I'm going to have to say no, because of the absolute, I mean, there's a huge range of tool qualities. And so maybe for someone so a brand that everyone knows would be like Ozito, which is like your Bunnings, as cheap as possible tool brand. You mean you could pick up a jigsaw for like $19.
Yeah.
It's going to cut a piece of wood. It's not going to do the best job. But if you have a $20 note, then you can buy a power tool.
You can do it, yeah.
And to be honest, if you can't afford that, then it's probably not your game.
Yeah. We've talked about this before about how
there's got to be a point.
It's not a savings endeavor. It's never going to be. It's an expensive hobby. Yeah.
I would go so far that the new, like, really big insurgence with social media of makers have impeded what people believe they need to start making
That's
things.
a good point.
And I think, like, Robin, you're an excellent example of you don't need every freaking tool in the factory to get a job done. Like, you don't have a table saw yet, and still you're making dining tables and dressers and all of these things that most people thought, I can't make a table because I haven't got this. But it's just because every single video online has a fully equipped workshop. Or not every video, but a lot of videos.
Yeah.
Actually, I absolutely applaud you, Robin, for not having a table saw. I think it's crazy, and that's probably not by choice necessarily, but it's like I think it's a great lesson learner of workarounds. Because one day when you get a table saw and that table saw breaks down, you'll have to go, oh, what did I used to do? And you'll have some idea of some other way to do something. So.
Yeah, the table saw does. I get a lot of comments about that on my videos. That people always say the table saw is the center of your workshop. So how can you operate without it? But yeah,
I don't think so actually. But that's interesting.
Like when I downsized, I had no table saw for a while, and I still managed to make do. But
yeah, well, that I
wanted it back.
It's interesting. The center of my workshop is actually the crappiest thing I have in my workshop, which is my assembly table.
Well, you see, I think a lot of people use their table saw as their assembly table because it's their most flat surface, and that's why people use this as their first point of milling or cutting or assembling. So yeah,
and that is true in a small shop. But I mean, I think your shop, you wouldn't need that to kind of live around that way.
Yeah, no, I don't think I need it yet. I'm not at the. Well, I mean, it would obviously be awesome. I'd love to have one, but I don't need it yet. I've been able to get around it.
Sounds like you're hinting for a machinery manufacturer there, Robin.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to send Robin a table saw.
Felder.
I should probably get an Ozito, just going on what you've been saying there, Joey.
Just get an Ozito skill saw and put it halfway through a piece of plywood, upside down. Bam.
What can possibly go wrong?
Yeah, safe as houses. The other thing as well with that question was wood. And I know that for me personally, a lot of my hardwood is all reclaimed. Now, I guess you could argue that I've been lucky and not everyone is as lucky as that. We've talked about before how Bunnings does have hardwood, but they're actually expensive. But I think a lot of the problem is people like myself don't want to go out to timber yards because there's a sort of a fear of a stigma of not knowing what you're talking about. But you can get good prices. Now, what that is compared to the rest of the world, I'm not sure, but maybe that just goes back to what we've said. Like for example, I've priced up a cot that I wanted to build, and I could either build it out of Meranti, which is going to cost was $350, or I can build it out of Tasmanian oak, which is going to cost about $600. Now, if I make it out of Meranti, it's going to be rubbish. It's going to be terrible. But if I make it out of Tassie oak, it's going to be a lot better. There's no getting around that. If I want a quality piece, I've got to spend the money, and I don't. So I don't think that's sort of impeding it. That's just like how much
reality.
How good do you want it to be? How much quality do you want in that piece?
And that was kind of what I was getting at when I said, if you can't afford a $20 store, that's the reality of what it is. And I think complaining about how much something costs is not going to change the fact that you can or can't afford it either. So exactly. I can't change your circumstances and make you make more money or not. So it's like, it's very, it's nothing to do with us really.
No. And there is always a workaround to get cheap or free material. It's just you have to be willing to put in the hard work and not expect that a quick Google search will show up. Oh, that's where all the $5 a length pieces of American white are. Like, you're not going to find it like that.
A lot of the timber that I'm using at the moment was me bashing on a JCB. Excuse me, mate, can you stop tearing that house apart? I want to take some of that wood. You know what I mean? Like, it was a pretty awkward situation, but that was what it took to get all of that wood. I've just seen Guy Jackson. First table saw was an old 9 1/4 Makita screwed in an old fridge. Yeah. That's brilliant.
I'd like to see the fence.
This is the handle of the fridge. All right. So we've got the last one then we've got is Gregory, who is currently in the chat. All right, we're going to have to shoot through these quick. What would be your top 10 woodworking tools you would buy to start? Maybe let's chop it down to
2.
Okay, let's do 2 or 3.
Workbench, chisels.
Workbench is a good one. I wouldn't actually consider that as a tool, but I think that's a really good point.
It's just a giant clamp.
Yeah, I like that. I would say like a mobile square, like 1.2 by 1.2 meter workbench would be the best thing I could have around at any given time. Some sort of lifting device, because stuff is heavy. So like something that you can lift things with. I find that's something really good, which isn't necessarily a tool though. And I'd say chisels. Good set of sharp chisels would be.
For me, a couple of the important ones, sort of the steps that improve my game. Combination square. I went without one of those for a long time. I use it every single day I'm in the shop. A nice hand plane. As much as I don't finish with mine, it's still a really cool tool to have, and it does make you feel like now I'm not just Joe Blogs who's trying to smash together something on the weekend. I'm a woodworker now. And then obviously now we're getting a bit more expensive, but a router for me was it's a good one. Huge thing. I use my router so much for all of the important joinery. That router is invaluable. I know you can do it with hand tools, but the router was game changer for me.
I'll add a router onto my list easily.
Cool. All right. I guess that's it. Should we talk about what we've been watching? Although I guess it's going to be Jordan. I'm guessing you don't have anything because you've been watching.
I've been watching a puppet show. Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
Go and check out Brian at the Sawdust Bureau on Instagram. Awesome dude. We've been chatting a little bit on Instagram, and what he's doing is pretty bloody cool. So go check out his awesome stuff and his awesome workshop. Cool.
All the links to what we've mentioned will be in the video description down below. I just want to mention, not any particular video, but just a channel. It's I think it's Sumo's Project. It's a guy by the name of Dirk who I got chatting to probably going on a year and a half now. And I just want to mention this channel because he's a super cool guy. He makes some pretty cool videos, but he's one of those guys who puts in a lot of effort into the community. And I think guys like that are really important to have around. Yeah. So I think it's Sumo's Project, but his name's Dirk. He'd be happy to say hello to you. He's a really rad guy. Go check him out.
Cool.
All right. Well, that's about it for the show then. anything more that you guys want to add?
No. Just
Nope.
sorry for missing the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so we will, the next, is it one more week after this or two after this?
I think it's just one more week of Monday. I can tell you actually right now. Give me one moment.
While you're looking that up, I also just want to plug now someone's told me how to pronounce this, but because they've pronounced it in text, I don't get it. Maleny.
Right.
It's the Maleny Wood Expo in May. Myself, Joey, and Jordan, we're going to be there. We're doing a talk on the Saturday midday. We're going to be basically representing the YouTube woodworking community. We're very excited about it. Obviously, it'd be amazing if you guys could all come out to it.
Yeah.
We'll be interviewing and talking to as many people as we can, turning it into a video of sorts. So if you guys can come along, it looks like a very cool expo. I will have the link below. I've also got a Facebook event that we're putting together. It's just a meetup for anyone who's not coming to the show, but they want to meet up with us as well. What I didn't realize is I've actually made the event private invite only, which I can't change now.
Awesome.
It was mentioned to me. I think it was Ron mentioned that to me. So what that means is that I need to email you the link. So if you want to get involved, I'll put the link below, but basically you've just got to shoot me an email and I'll invite you. There's no problem with that. So
what if we just make a new event? Would that be easier?
Maybe I
or
should.
Is it too much hassle?
No, you know what? Actually, maybe I should, because otherwise
I don't want to step on your toes because I know you're adminning it, so I don't want to.
No, let me do that actually. Let me do that because I think we've only got a few people who have definited. Okay, I will have the new event in this video. Yeah, sorry about that. I just assumed that you'd be able to change it afterwards because I was worried that we'd just have random people joining it. So yeah, I'll make it public and then we can go from there.
Cool.
All right. So yeah, Jordan, is it next Monday? And then that's it?
Sorry, we've got two more.
Two more. I thought so. Okay. So the show will be next Monday, the Monday after that, and then we're back to Thursday as per usual.
Correct.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you are on iTunes, and thanks for watching if you're on YouTube, and thanks to everyone in the chat. Some very cool comments as always. We really do appreciate you guys joining in the show. All right. Well, we'll see you again, same time, same place next Monday.
Catch you later.